Okay, so picture the Earth. Right at its very top is the North Pole, a place that's way, way deadlier than its southern cousin. You see, the South Pole sits on a massive continent, Antarctica. But the North Pole? There's no land there at all. Let's dive into this deadly illusion. So, what makes the North Pole so lethal? Well, the answer lies right beneath your feet, which is basically nothing. It's a place built on a truly fatal illusion. And here's the huge difference. The North Pole isn't land. It's a massive sheet of ice just floating on the deep, dark Arctic Ocean. The South Pole has 3 kilometers of ice sitting on solid rock. But at the North Pole, the very ground you're standing on is constantly moving. And this ground is incredibly dynamic. The ice is always drifting, and it can just crack open without any warning, creating these dangerous fissures of open water called leads. And when two of these giant ice sheets collide, they can form these immense pressure ridges, basically walls of ice that can be up to 20 meters high. Now, if that ice breaks and you fall into that black, frigid water, the cold shock alone can make you involuntarily gasp, flooding your lungs. And even if you manage to avoid that, the hypothermia sets in so fast it can shut down your body's vital functions in as little as 90 seconds. And it's not just the ice. The environment itself is absolutely brutal. Temperatures can plummet to minus 50 degrees Celsius. For 6 months of the year, the sun never even rises. It's just one long, continuous polar night. And you're not alone. This is the hunting ground of 600-kilogram polar bears, apex predators that absolutely see humans as potential prey. Which, of course, leads to the obvious question. With all of these dangers, why would anyone even try to go here? What could possibly drive people to face an environment so fundamentally hostile to human life? To answer that, let's look at one of the earliest and most tragic attempts to conquer the pole. It's a story of incredible bravery that taught the world a very, very harsh lesson about this place. Back in July 1897, Solomon André and his 2 companions boarded a hydrogen balloon they called the Eagle. Their plan was unbelievably audacious. Just fly to the North Pole. But only 65 hours in, ice and wind forced them to crash land on the pack ice. Stranded, they started this desperate 3-month trek, dragging these heavy sleds across the unforgiving terrain, battling starvation and that brutal minus 40-degree cold. They never made it back. So, get this. 33 years later, their perfectly preserved bodies were found, along with their diaries and a camera with undeveloped film. The photos they took showed these 3 men stranded on the ice, knowing they would never see home again, but still documenting their ordeal. And for the first time, the world really understood. The North Pole wasn't some prize to be won, it was a killer. The André expedition proved that a direct assault on the pole was basically suicide. So how did we finally learn to survive there? Well, the answer came decades later, from a pretty unlikely source, with a completely different philosophy. Don't fight the ice, live with it. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union did something nobody had ever even imagined. Instead of trying to race to a single point on a map, they set up the world's first drifting ice stations. These were scientific camps built on massive chunks of floating sea ice that would just drift along with the ocean currents. The very first one of these, North Pole 1, was set up in 1937, and it was unbelievably basic. I mean, we're talking 4 men, a single tent, and some scientific gear. For 274 days, they lived and drifted on an ice floe, and in doing so, they proved that long-term science in the high Arctic was actually possible.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing. Between 1937 and 1991, the Soviets successfully ran 31 of these drifting stations. It was a revolutionary approach that completely changed our ability to study and understand the Arctic. So, how has this all evolved? Today, human presence at the top of the world really relies on two main strategies, because building a permanent base at the geographic North Pole is still impossible.
First, you've got these temporary ice camps, like Camp Barneo, which gets built on the sea ice every spring for just a few weeks. It's incredibly risky. The ice can literally break apart at any time. The second, more stable solution is the permanent stations built on the nearest bits of land, like Canada's CFS Alert, which is just over 600 kilometers from the pole.
Now, living in these places is a constant logistical battle. You can forget fresh food, almost everything is canned or dried. Every single drop of drinking water has to be melted from snow, and that process just eats up huge amounts of fuel. All the power comes from diesel generators. And if you have a medical emergency, well, the situation is dire. The nearest hospital is thousands of kilometers away. The daily reality is just intense. Just stepping outside for a few minutes requires a whole 20-minute layering process. Multiple thermal layers, a heavy parka, insulated pants, boots, a balaclava, goggles. In that minus 50-degree air, any exposed skin gets frostbite almost instantly. For a century, the story of the North Pole was all about human survival against nature. But today, the biggest challenge isn't just the cold. It's that the very nature of this frontier is changing, creating a whole new kind of human race. Here's the thing. The Arctic is now warming at twice the rate of the global average. The very ice that has defined this region for thousands of years, the ice that was a nearly impossible barrier for explorers, is rapidly disappearing. And as that ice melts, it's revealing what was always hidden underneath: huge reserves of oil, natural gas, and minerals. New, faster shipping routes are opening up, cutting travel time between continents by weeks. The barrier that once was the ultimate test of survival is now becoming a strategic prize. And this has kicked off a new polar race, not for the glory of exploration, but for economic and military control. Back in 2007, a Russian submarine planted a flag on the seabed directly beneath the North Pole, a pretty powerful symbol of what's to come. The first race to the pole was for glory, a battle between humanity and nature. This new race is for resources, a competition between nations. And it leaves us with one final question. As the deadly illusion of solid ice melts away, what will the new race for the North Pole truly cost us?